The train station smelled faintly of rain and steel. Voices tangled in the air, urgent goodbyes, impatient footsteps, the low growl of an approaching train. Maya stood still in the middle of the platform, her fingers wrapped around the handle of a small, worn suitcase. The leather was peeling near the edges, and one of the brass clasps hung loose like a crooked smile. A red scarf, its threads fraying in places, was tied tightly around her wrist, fluttering slightly in the draft that swept through whenever the doors slid open. She wasn't looking at the trains. She was staring at the ticket in her other hand, the paper trembling slightly because her grip refused to steady. A man brushed past, muttering an apology, but she barely noticed. From the far side of the platform, a child's laughter cut through the air, light, unfiltered. Maya's gaze flicked toward the sound, catching sight of a little girl pressed against the glass wall, drawing with a stub of crayon on a scrap of paper. The girl's mother tugged her away, and the drawing slipped to the ground, curling as it fell. For a moment, Maya's breath caught. That piece of paper, rough, imperfect, looked more alive than anything she'd touched in years. The station clock chimed. For minutes until departure. She could feel the words her mother had once said, as sharp as they'd been that night. "You'll never be a real artist, Maya. The world doesn't feed dreamers." The memory rose uninvited, pushing heat into her chest, though her face remained still. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She didn't check it. She knew who it was. Instead, she let her eyes wander to the glass ceiling above the platform, where the rain had begun to trace delicate rivers across its surface. Each droplet shimmered briefly before joining another, finding its way down. The train pulled in, massive, silver, and loud enough to drown the rest of the world. Wind rushed past, lifting the ends of her scarf so that it brushed against her cheek. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting that moment sit heavy in her palms. Somewhere behind her, someone called her name. Her eyes opened. She stepped forward. The scarf's knot tugged against her wrist as if it knew the weight it carried, the years stitched into its fading threads. She didn't untie it. The train doors slid open with a sharp hiss. Maya didn't move. Not yet. She stood there, eyes locked on the dark interior beyond the doorway, the sound of rain on glass growing louder in her ears, until it was almost all she could hear. And then, softly, she whispered to herself, "Not this time." The hiss of the train doors seemed to stretch longer than it should have, as if the station itself were waiting for her to decide. Maya's fingers tightened on the suitcase handle. The cracked brass clasp pressed against her palm, familiar and unyielding. She'd carried this same bag when she was 9, the day her father left for the last time. He had crouched in the doorway, smiled through tired eyes, and placed a little tin of watercolor paints inside. "For when you see something worth keeping," he'd said. She had never thrown the tin away. It still sat in the bottom of the suitcase, its lid dented, the paint cakes crumbling at the edges. A gust of wind swept across the platform, bringing with it the scent of damp concrete and burnt coffee. Her scarf fluttered wildly, the frayed ends dancing like they had their own heartbeat. She remembered when it was new, bright, defiant red, her first paycheck splurged on something unnecessary but beautiful. Back then, she'd worn it to her first gallery submission, her mother's words still raw in her ears. The gallery had declined. She'd gone home and folded the scarf away, certain it had been a foolish kind of armor. Now it clung to her wrist like it belonged there. A pair of passengers hurried past her, man and woman, laughing as they squeezed through the train doors, their coats brushing against each other. Just beyond them, a young man stepped down from the carriage and into the arms of someone waiting. Their embrace was so certain, so practiced, it hurt to look at. No one was here for her. From across the platform, she noticed him. A stranger leaning against the steel column, hands in his pockets, watching her in a way that wasn't impatient, just steady. His coat collar was turned up, rain speckling the dark fabric. He didn't smile, didn't look away when she caught his gaze. The silence between them was like an unanswered question. She shifted her weight, breaking eye contact. Her mother's voice returned, "Life is not about chasing foolish colors." Her phone buzzed again. This time, she pulled it out. The name lit up on the screen, sharp against the glow, Mom. She let it ring. The train's warning chime sounded. People shuffled inside. The stranger still hadn't moved. Maya stepped toward the open door, the scarf's knot tugging again against her wrist. Inside, the air was warm, a faint scent of worn leather seats and travel lingering in it. She placed one foot on the step. And stopped. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes flicking from the stranger's still, unreadable face to the rain streaking down the glass ceiling above them. Somewhere deep in her chest, something hesitated, not out of fear, but out of knowing this choice would not be undone. The chime sounded again. Her lips curved, just slightly, in a confused, almost defiant smile. The train's engine hummed, low and steady, like a heartbeat she wasn't sure was hers. Maya's foot remained on the step, the rest of her caught somewhere between departure and return. The stranger shifted slightly, enough for her to notice the frayed edge of his right shoe, black leather, scuffed and softened by years of walking. His hand slipped briefly into his coat pocket, pulling out a battered wallet. He opened it just enough to tuck something inside, but not before she caught a glimpse, a creased photograph, its edges curled. A woman, maybe, and a boy with untamed hair, faces too blurred by time to be certain. A sharp crack of thunder rolled over the station, and the rain intensified, tracing frantic rivers down the glass ceiling until the world above blurred into gray. It made the light dimmer, colder. Maya felt a shift inside her, a tug of recognition she didn't want to name. That photograph, those faces, looked like something you carried when you couldn't let go. She knew that weight. Her suitcase had it. Her scarf had it. She had it in the way her chest tightened when her mother's name appeared on her phone. The warning chime sounded again, sharper this time. She told herself to step inside. That she had to go. That the ticket in her hand had been too expensive to waste. That this platform, this city, this past, it had nothing left for her but echoes. But when she glanced at him again, he was watching her not with curiosity, but with the kind of stillness that felt like he already understood what she was deciding. Her thoughts twisted. Was it fate, drawing her gaze to him over and over? Or was it something else, something like a lure, pulling her toward a story she didn't ask to be part of? A loudspeaker announcement blurred into the background. The rain's rhythm filled the gaps between words. In her mind, she saw herself on the train, safe, moving forward, clean break. And then she saw herself stepping back onto the platform, wet hair plastered to her face, suitcase heavy at her side, the stranger's unreadable gaze following her. She wanted to believe she was choosing freedom, not weakness. But which choice was which? The conductor stepped out, scanning the platform, eyes briefly on her. Maya's hand tightened on the suitcase handle. She felt the scarf's knot again, warm against her skin despite the cold air, like it knew her pulse better than she did. She looked at the stranger one last time. He didn't smile. He didn't move. She stepped, and the sound of the doors beginning to close drowned out whatever she thought might happen next. The doors paused mid-close, then slid back open with a reluctant sigh. Someone had blocked them. Maya's breath caught, half from surprise, half from the weight of the decision she still hadn't made. She stepped back onto the platform as if the air outside had more gravity than the train could bear. The conductor's frown lingered on her for a moment before he turned away. A couple nearby exchanged a quiet, knowing glance. The woman's eyes darted toward Maya's suitcase, then to the scarf around her wrist, as if silently guessing the story. Society had a way of doing that, judging without asking, assuming without knowing. Maya lowered her gaze and started walking toward the far bench, away from the train, away from him. Her pulse was a steady drum in her ears. She told herself this was it. She'd put distance between them. She'd let the moment dissolve. But she stopped. Somewhere behind her, the sound of a zipper caught her attention. She turned, slowly, half afraid of what she'd see. The stranger was holding her scarf. No, not hers. But the same. That deep, weathered red, frayed at the edges, knotted in the same way. For a second, her mind refused to bridge the space between coincidence and something heavier. He ran his thumb along the fabric like it was a fragile memory. When his gaze lifted to meet hers, it carried a quiet recognition, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. A voice in the crowd called out for someone else entirely, but it made her flinch all the same. People moved between them, wet coats, umbrellas dripping, boots squeaking on the slick floor, yet the thread of connection didn't break. The rain was louder now, tapping insistently on the station roof. She thought of the phrase her father once told her on a night when she'd failed at everything she'd tried. Some people carry more than just bags, Maya, they carry silence. She understood it now. A child passing by tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed at the scarf in the stranger's hands. The mother shushed him gently, giving Maya a look she couldn't quite read, pity, maybe. Or warning. Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to ask him why. She wanted to walk away before she did. Both urges pulled at her with equal strength. He took a single step forward, but no more. The distance between them was small enough for the scent of rain on his coat to drift toward her. Her suitcase handle was slick under her palm. She gripped it harder, though she wasn't sure if it was to keep from dropping it, or from stepping closer. The loudspeaker announced the train's final boarding call. She didn't move. Neither did he. And the space between them felt like it could break. The rain had slowed to a fine mist, but the glass ceiling still blurred the light. The station felt quieter now, like the noise had stepped back to make space for something else. Maya's scarf, his scarf, hung in his hand, its color deeper under the dim light, almost bruised. She was about to speak when he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He didn't hand it to her right away. He simply held it there, between them. When she finally took it, her fingers brushed the edge of something rigid inside. She unfolded it slowly, the paper slightly damp from his touch. It wasn't just a letter, it was a formal job offer, the company name printed at the top in a bold serif she recognized immediately. Her stomach dropped. She'd applied there 2 weeks ago, poured hours into her portfolio, sent it off with a quiet hope she barely admitted to herself. The rejection had never come, but neither had an answer. And there, in neat black ink, was her name. Her gaze darted to him. I read your work, he said, his voice calm, almost hesitant. Months ago. It hit her then, not fate, not coincidence. He wasn't just a stranger. He was the owner. The decision maker. The gate she had tried to pass through without knowing he stood on the other side. The scarf shifted in his hand, and something else fell with it, a small photo, the same one she'd glimpsed before. This time she saw clearly, a girl, maybe 10, with the same scarf knotted loosely around her wrist. The smile in the picture was the kind you don't fake. She used to draw on everything, he said, his thumb brushing the fabric like it was bone-deep memory. Walls, receipts, train tickets. Said it made the world softer. Maya's pulse hammered. Her father's words came back, looping in her mind. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence. Only now it landed different. This wasn't just about silence, it was about what you carry when the person who made noise in your life is gone. The weight in her chest wasn't just hers anymore. The final boarding call echoed again, tinny against the station's hollow air. She knew, stepping on that train now wouldn't erase this moment. Staying wouldn't either. Whatever happened next would fold into her life like ink into water, impossible to separate. Her suitcase felt lighter than it had all morning. Without another word, she turned from the platform and followed him, not toward the train, but through the narrow side door the public never used. The lock clicked shut behind them. The narrow hallway behind the side door smelled of dust and rain-soaked stone. Their footsteps echoed, hers quick and uncertain, his slow and deliberate. Maya's pulse thrummed in her ears, drowning out the muted clamor of the station beyond. They entered a small office, its single lamp throwing a circle of amber light across a desk scattered with sketches. She froze. They weren't his sketches. They were hers. Pages she recognized from the portfolio she'd submitted weeks ago, crooked lines, trembling colors, the pieces she almost hadn't sent because they felt too raw. He stepped around her, placing the red scarf on the desk beside the drawings. "I wasn't going to call you," he said quietly. "Not because you weren't good enough. But because," his voice trailed. She followed his gaze to the photograph on the desk, his daughter again, wearing that scarf, sunlight catching in her hair. "You draw like she did," he continued. "You see the world in the same broken pieces. It's unbearable, sometimes." Maya felt the air thin. The weight of the suitcase handle cut into her palm, grounding her. "So why bring me here?" "Because you shouldn't leave." It wasn't a confession of love. It wasn't a rescue. It was something colder, stranger, like he needed her presence to keep the memory of his daughter breathing in this space. The scarf lay between them, heavy with history. She realized it had stopped being hers the moment he touched it. Her father's words looped again. "Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence." She set the suitcase down, fingers loosening. "Then take it," she said, sliding the scarf toward him. "If it keeps her close." He looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. He didn't thank her. He didn't argue. He just wrapped the scarf around his wrist the way she had, knotting it with practiced care. Maya turned to leave, but her gaze lingered on the drawings one last time. In the soft lamplight, they looked different, less like desperate attempts to be seen, more like proof she had been. When she stepped back into the station, the noise felt sharper, the air colder. The train she'd meant to take was gone. She walked to the far end of the platform, the same place she'd stood when it began, the sound of rain on the glass above, the hum of an approaching train somewhere in the distance. But now, she was lighter. She had left something behind, her scarf, her hesitation, the version of herself still begging for permission. The suitcase felt almost empty. She didn't look back when the next train arrived. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The city was quieter after the rain. Puddles reflected fragments of streetlights, and the air carried that washed-clean smell that only comes when the storm has finally moved on. Maya walked without rushing, the wheels of her suitcase humming softly against the uneven pavement. Every step felt different, lighter, though she hadn't boarded any train. She passed a bakery just closing for the night, the scent of warm bread spilling briefly into the street before the door clicked shut. Across the road, a boy sat cross-legged on the curb, sketching with a stub of pencil in the corner of a tattered notebook. His lines were messy, urgent. She smiled without meaning to. When she reached her apartment, the quiet felt almost like an embrace. She set the suitcase down in the middle of the small living room. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she unzipped it. The tin of watercolor paints lay at the bottom, just as it had since she was a child, lid dented, colors worn into shallow wells. She lifted it out, running her thumb along the edge. The scarf wasn't there anymore, but the absence didn't feel like a loss. She placed the paint tin on her desk, directly beneath the small lamp that cast a warm, steady circle of light. Beside it, she left one blank sheet of paper, the kind that seemed to wait patiently for what it would hold. Her father's voice drifted through memory, softer now. "Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition." She thought of the stranger, of the scarf tied around his wrist, of the way his eyes had not asked her to stay, only made space for her to choose. She thought of the girl in the photograph, smiling with the same defiant warmth Maya had once carried in her own reflection. The city's sound swelled faintly through the window, the hum of traffic, a dog barking somewhere, laughter carried from far down the street. Life continuing, indifferent yet inviting. She sat at her desk, the watercolor tin open, the brush in her hand hovering just above the paper. For a moment, she didn't paint. She simply listened, to the rain still dripping from the eaves, to the quiet rhythm of her own breathing, to the memory of a platform where she almost left and almost stayed. The brush touched the paper. Color bloomed. And she realized she didn't need to decide yet if she had won or lost, only that she had changed. Because sometimes the most important journeys are the ones you never take.